The moment my nephew stopped drawing, just put his crayons down in the middle of our usual Sunday afternoon session, I knew something was wrong. He was 6 years old. He never stopped drawing voluntarily, not for snacks, not for TV, not for anything. Jaylen could color for 3 hours straight without looking up. His occupational therapist called it his anchor, the one activity that kept him regulated, grounded, present. So when he set down the orange crayon, turned to face me, and looked at me with those dark, too serious eyes, my stomach dropped before he even opened his mouth. My brother Damon and his wife Sasha had left 20 minutes earlier. Date night, they said. Dinner reservation at that new place downtown. They'd be back by 10. Jaylen and I had a whole evening planned around his drawings and my terrible attempts at coloring inside the lines. But Jaylen wasn't drawing anymore. He was looking at me the way you look at someone when you're about to say something that costs you something, Auntie Meg. His voice was barely above a whisper. Don't eat the lasagna Mommy left. I almost laughed. Almost. There was something in how he said it, not I don't want lasagna or can we order pizza instead. Don't eat it. Like it was a warning. Why not, buddy? I kept my voice light. Easy. Normal. He picked up the orange crayon, turned it over in his fingers, set it down again, because Daddy's going to be gone soon, and then Grandma. And then it's just supposed to be you. The room went very quiet. Let me go back a few hours because I need you to understand what kind of family I come from, what kind of person I thought my sister-in-law was, what I thought I knew, which turns out was almost nothing. My name is Meg Whitmore. I'm 31 years old. I work in financial services in Winnipeg. Compliance auditing, the kind of job where I make sure numbers tell the truth. My friends joke that I'm wired for suspicion, that I look at everything sideways and wait for it to be lying. I always laughed it off. Turns out the one place I wasn't suspicious enough was my own family. Damon is 4 years older than me. He's a project manager at a civil engineering firm, steady and methodical in the way that middle children in chaotic households often become. Growing up, he was the one who remembered to pay bills, who drove me to skating practice at 5:30 in the morning without complaining, who sat with our mother through every chemo appointment without being asked. He is genuinely one of the best people I know, which is maybe why I never questioned the woman he chose to marry. Sasha came into his life 8 years ago. She was polished, confident, the kind of person who always knew the right thing to say in any situation. Damon was devoted to her from the start. I remember thinking she was almost too good, too composed, too effortlessly charming, but I chalked it up to nerves, to my own awkwardness around new people. I wanted to like her. She was going to be my sister-in-law, so I decided I did. Jaylen was born 6 years ago. They knew early on that he was autistic. The formal assessment came when he was 2.5, though anyone who'd spent time with him knew there was something different about how he moved through the world. Not less. Different. He noticed things other kids didn't. He had opinions about color sequences that were surprisingly sophisticated. He was funny in a dry, sideways way that took you off guard. He communicated mostly through drawing, not because he couldn't speak. He could and did in short, careful sentences when he had something worth saying. But drawing was his primary language. His OT said this was common, that some kids process and express through visual spatial channels first. Sasha had learned to read his drawings, she said. She was so patient with him, so dedicated, everyone said so. I moved back to Winnipeg 2 years ago when our mother got her diagnosis. Early-stage dementia, the kind that creeps in slowly and then isn't slow at all. She was still herself, mostly, sharp on good days, foggy on bad ones. She'd given Damon and me power of attorney jointly back when she was first diagnosed. She'd also updated her will around the same time. Her house and savings, roughly $340,000 between the property and her retirement accounts, to be split evenly between us. Her financial advisor was a woman named Ms. Beaumont, who'd managed the accounts for 15 years and knew the family well. I thought everything was in order. I thought we were all just getting through something hard together. I hadn't been looking at the numbers. That Sunday started the way most of them did. I drove over to Damon's after lunch, arms full of art supplies I'd found at the craft store on sale. New metallic markers that I knew Jaylen would lose his mind over. He met me at the door before I'd even knocked. He must have been watching from the window. The metallic markers were a hit. We settled in at the kitchen table while Damon and Sasha got ready to go out. I noticed Sasha moving around the kitchen with a kind of purposeful energy, like she was checking things off a list inside her head. She pulled a foil-covered casserole dish from the fridge and set it on the counter. "I made lasagna for you two," she said, not quite looking at me. "It just needs 40 minutes at 375. Jaylen loves it." She said it with her back to me, which was normal. She was still tidying the counter, but something about the way she'd framed it. "Jaylen loves it. Not I hope you enjoy it. Not help yourselves. Jaylen loves it." Like she was preemptively managing any hesitation. I thanked her. Damon hugged me on his way out, said they'd be home by 10, told me not to let Jaylen stay up past 8:30. They left. I heard the car pull out of the driveway. 20 minutes later, Jaylen put down his orange crayon and told me not to eat the lasagna. "Don't eat it, 'cause Daddy's going to be gone soon, and then Grandma, and then it's just supposed to be you." I set my own markers down very slowly, the way you move when you're afraid a sudden gesture might shatter something. "Jaylen." I kept my voice the way I keep it when clients are telling me something they're scared to say, level, warm, with absolutely no reaction in it. "Can you tell me more about that?" He didn't answer right away. He picked up a blue marker, drew a small square, drew another one beside it. "Mommy says Daddy has a sick heart," he said. Damon did not have a sick heart. I'd spoken to him 2 weeks ago about the results from his recent physical. He was fine. He was running. For God's sake, he'd just signed up for a half marathon in the spring. "When did Mommy say that?" I asked. "On the phone." I was under the table. He drew a third square. "She says I don't notice things, but I notice everything. I just don't say. That landed like a stone dropped in still water," he continued, still drawing. He wasn't looking at me. Sometimes he found it easier to talk when he wasn't looking. "She was talking about the papers, Grandma's papers. She said Grandma is getting so confused she'll sign anything. She said once the papers are done, Daddy's heart is going to get worse. And then it'll just be Auntie Meg. And she needs to be gone too before anyone checks." He said this in the same quiet, careful voice he used to explain why purple and yellow shouldn't go next to each other. I don't remember deciding to stand up. I was just standing. "Buddy," I said, "can I put the lasagna in the fridge for now? We'll order from that pizza place you like." He looked up at me then, nodded, went back to drawing. I covered the dish and put it back in the fridge. My hands were shaking badly enough that I had to put both palms flat on the counter and breathe for a minute before I picked up my phone. The first person I called was my closest friend, a woman I've known since university. She'd trained as a nurse and now worked in critical care at St. Boniface. She answered on the second ring. When I said her name, she must have heard something in my voice because she just said, "Where?" And I told her, and she said 20 minutes. She made it in 17. She came through the door still in her jacket, took one look at the expression on my face and said, "Okay, start from the beginning." I told her everything. Jaylen was in the next room, drawing. I kept my voice low, steady, like if I kept the words controlled, I could control what they meant. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she looked toward the hallway, toward the room where Jaylen sat with his markers. "He's been carrying that," she said. It wasn't a question. She asked about the lasagna. I told her what Jaylen had said. She asked if I had any gloves. She always had a pair in her bag, a nurse habit, and she carefully took a small sample from the dish into a container she made from a doubled Ziploc bag. She had a contact at the hospital lab, someone who owed her a favor. "If there's anything in there that shouldn't be," she said, sealing the bag, "we'll know by morning." She held the container up and looked at it. "Who makes a casserole for someone they want out of the picture?" She said it flatly. Not a question. "That's not even ambitious. That's lazy." I almost laughed. Almost. We needed more, and I knew it. My word against Sasha's, a 6-year-old's account, however precise, however devastating, wasn't going to be enough on its own. Sasha would call it a misunderstanding, a child mishearing something, the garbled logic of a kid who didn't process language the same way other kids did. She would use Jaylen's autism against him. I was certain of that. I thought about what I knew. I thought about my mother's accounts, her will, the power of attorney she'd given Damon and me jointly. Then I thought about something that had been bothering me for months without me fully registering why. The last time I'd visited my mother, she'd asked me about a check. She said she'd signed something for Damon, but Damon hadn't mentioned it to me, and he always mentioned things like that. We had a system. I called Ms. Beaumont. I know it was late on a Sunday. I'd met her twice at family meetings and had her number in my phone because we were joint account trustees and she'd wanted both of us accessible. She answered, and I apologized, and then I explained enough of what was happening that she understood this wasn't a casual call. There was a long pause on her end. "Meg," she said carefully, "I had a call last week from a notary in Portage-la-Prairie. They wanted to verify your mother's cognitive status for a document signing. I told them that any changes to estate documents required both power of attorney holders present, and that your mother's capacity had to be formally assessed by her physician first." My throat tightened. What kind of document? A codicil to the will, amending the distribution of the estate. Another pause. It would have redirected everything to Damon's wife. As the surviving spousal unit of the primary beneficiary, I sat down on the kitchen floor. I don't remember choosing to do that either. The notary seemed surprised I knew protocol, Ms. Beaumont said. I don't think they expected pushback. I flagged it and notified the estate lawyer, but I hadn't heard anything further. I assumed it had been abandoned. It hadn't been abandoned. It had just moved to a notary in a different city, one who didn't know us, one who might not have Ms. Beaumont's 17 years of context and protectiveness. I thought about Jaylen's drawing, 3 small squares on a page. I asked Ms. Beaumont if she could put a formal alert on my mother's accounts until we could meet in person. She said yes without hesitation. Then I thought about Damon. He didn't know. He couldn't know. The Damon I knew would sooner burn his own hands than let some harm our mother, harm me. He'd married Sasha believing she was the person she presented to everyone. I understood that. I had to. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped hiding it from herself, and eventually she'd stopped hiding it from the walls and the children who sat under tables listening. I called Damon at 9:15, not his cell. It would go to Sasha's attention the moment it buzzed if they were at dinner together. I called the restaurant directly, asked to leave a message for my brother, told them to tell him it was a family emergency and please call his sister from a private line. He called back from the restaurant's bar phone 11 minutes later. "Meg, what happened? Is it Mom? Damon, I need you to listen to me and not react where Sasha can see you." I waited. I heard him breathe. "Okay," he said. I told him about Jaylen. I told him about the lasagna. I told him what Ms. Beaumont had said. I kept my voice completely flat because I needed him to be able to think, not feel, for the next few minutes. When I finished, there was silence, not the silence of disbelief, the silence of a person whose world has just been rearranged. "Okay," he said. His voice was controlled in the same way mine had been. "We're built the same way in a crisis, Damon and me. We hold it together until it's safe to fall apart. What do you need me to do? I need you to come home separately from her. I need you to pretend everything is completely normal when you walk back in, and I need you to stay calm." Another long pause. "Jaylen's okay?" "Jaylen is drawing. He's fine. He's been watching out for me before I even knew I needed watching out for." I heard my brother make a sound that wasn't quite a word. It took me a second to realize he was crying. Damon came home at 9:45. He came through the back door, which Sasha never used because it meant walking past the recycling bins. He sat down at the kitchen table and I put a cup of tea in front of him, and for a few minutes, neither of us said anything. My friend had left an hour earlier, but she texted at 10:17. The lab had rushed the sample, elevated levels of a compound used in prescription laxatives, far above the therapeutic dose, mixed with a high concentration of valerian root extract. On their own, neither was dangerous. Together, at those concentrations, they would cause severe gastrointestinal distress and profound sedation. Not fatal, but enough to put someone in the ER for 2 or 3 days. Enough to incapacitate. I read the text twice, then I showed Damon. He set the phone down on the table very carefully. "She's done this before," he said quietly. "With me. Twice in the past year I've been sick, really sick, out of commission for days. I thought it was a stomach bug." I looked at him. "I thought," he said, then stopped, then started again. "I thought she was taking care of me." I reached across the table and put my hand over his. Sasha came home at 10:12, full of energy from the evening, talking about the restaurant and some couple they'd run into. She paused when she saw us both at the table. Her eyes went to the foil dish on the counter. I'd taken it back out of the fridge and placed it where she'd left it, so she'd have no reason to think I'd touched it. "You didn't eat," she said. To me. Her tone was flat, one shade off normal. "Jaylen wanted pizza," I said. I couldn't say no. "You know how he is about Sundays." She looked at Damon. He met her eyes. He was good. He was so good. He looked tired and ordinary and gave absolutely nothing away. "I'm exhausted," he said. "Can we talk in the morning? My head's been bad all evening." She relaxed. It was subtle, a micro shift in her shoulders, in the set of her jaw, but I'd been watching for it. She believed him. She went upstairs to check on Jaylen. The moment we heard the creak of Jaylen's bedroom door, I looked at Damon and nodded. He texted the family lawyer from the kitchen table. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. We had to be completely ordinary. We had to be a family having a regular week. I had dinner with them on Tuesday, accepted a glass of wine that Sasha had poured before I arrived. I set it down and forgot about it, and nobody commented. Damon was performing the role of his life. He told me later that he spent those evenings watching her face and trying to understand how he hadn't seen it earlier. I told him she was very good at being seen. During those 3 days, the legal machinery moved faster than I expected. Our family lawyer, who was also our mother's estate lawyer, filed an emergency notation on my mother's will. He contacted the Law Society of Manitoba about the notary in Portage la Prairie and learned that Sasha had visited that office twice. The second visit had been scheduled for the coming Friday. My mother's physician was notified and provided a formal capacity assessment confirming that my mother did not have the cognitive ability to authorize major estate changes without both power of attorney holders present. That assessment went into the record. The local police were briefed. The lab results went to a Crown attorney who had done family fraud cases before and who took the whole thing very seriously. She told us this was not a small file. On Thursday evening, I took Jaylen for a walk, just the two of us. It was one of those October evenings in Winnipeg that are cold enough to see your breath, but not so cold that you want to go back inside. The leaves were mostly down. He walked beside me with his hands in his jacket pockets and talked, in his careful way, about how he'd noticed the trees looked different before they lost their leaves. "Like they know," he said. "Know what? That something's changing. They turn the most color right before they let go." I looked at this 6-year-old child walking beside me, this kid who sat under tables and noticed everything and kept what he heard inside himself for God knows how long, because he didn't have the words for it yet, or the certainty that someone would believe him. "Jaylen," I said, "why did you tell me on Sunday? Why did you decide to say something?" He thought about this for a whole half block. "Because Grandma told me something once," he said. "She said some things are too heavy to keep inside your body. She said when something is too heavy, you find someone safe and you put it in their hands." I stopped walking. My mother, on one of her good days, she still had them, had given her grandson, my nephew, the exact instruction he needed to save us both. "Were you scared?" I asked. "Yes," he said simply. "But you did it anyway." "Yeah," he looked up at me. "You're safe." I didn't cry until he'd gone back inside, and I was standing alone on the front step in the cold for 5 minutes myself. Friday morning, the notary's office in Portage la Prairie. I wasn't there. Damon wasn't there, but the police were. Sasha walked into that office at 10:15, carrying the forged codicil, a second document requesting emergency access to the estate accounts, and a typed letter purportedly from my mother's physician, which the police later confirmed was fabricated, certifying that my mother was of sound mind and had expressed a wish to update her estate independently. 2 plainclothes officers were in the waiting area. A third was already with the notary. I watched the footage later on a secure link the officer in charge sent to our lawyer. I watched my sister-in-law walk through that door with complete confidence. I watched her sit down at the table across from the notary with her leather portfolio and her perfectly composed expression and begin explaining what she needed. I watched the moment the door opened and the second officer entered the room. I watched her face. The composure went, not gradually, all at once. What was underneath it was something I didn't recognize, something cold and very still. "This is a mistake," she said. Her voice was steady. She was still trying. "I don't know what you've been told, but I have authorization. We have the document you've submitted," the officer said. "We also have the original will, a formal capacity assessment of your mother-in-law, and forensic confirmation that the authorization signature is not a match for either current power of attorney holder. Your husband provided a voluntary statement 2 days ago." She went very quiet. They arrested her at 10:47. Fraud, forgery, attempted fraud on a vulnerable person. My mother's dementia was a significant factor in the charges, and the food tampering charge, which was separate and serious. The Crown Attorney later told us she'd added an elder financial abuse provision to the list, which in Manitoba carried significant additional weight. I found out all of this from Damon, who called me from the car in the parking lot of a Tim Hortons 20 minutes after it was done. His voice was completely steady until it wasn't. "It's over," he said. "It's over," I told him. He was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about Jaylen under that table," he said, 6 years old, listening to all of that, not knowing what to do with it. "He knew exactly what to do with it," I said. "He waited until he found someone safe, and then he put it in her hands." Damon made a sound. I heard him pull himself back together. "He gets it from Mom," he said. "That steadiness." "Yeah," I said, "he does." 3 weeks later, family court. Damon had retained his own counsel immediately after Sasha's arrest. The custody situation was urgent. Jaylen needed stability, needed to not be moved between households while the criminal case worked itself out. Damon had never had any involvement in the planning. His cooperation with the investigation had been immediate and complete. His lawyer was very good. The judge reviewed everything: the criminal charges, the evidence file, the statements, the forensic analysis, the lab reports, Damon's voluntary cooperation, and a separate affidavit I had filed about Jaylen's account of what he'd overheard and the weight it had carried. She was a woman in her 60s with an efficient manner and, I thought, kind eyes. She asked to speak to Jaylen privately with a child specialist in the room. He'd been prepared for this, carefully, gently, and he went in with his drawing kit and came out 40 minutes later saying she had a very nice fish tank. The judge's ruling: full custody to Damon, the evidence of the financial crimes, the attempted poisoning, and the systemic manipulation of a household where a child was present, all of it went into her assessment. She was direct in her language. She said that a child raised in proximity to that kind of conduct and expected to absorb and contain it, as Jaylen clearly had been, required consistency, safety, and stability. She said that Daysman's home, now cleared of that influence, could provide it. She looked at Damon when she said it. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at Jaylen, sitting beside me with a drawing on his lap he'd been working on all morning. The courtroom, rendered in careful small squares, with one large orange shape at the center I couldn't immediately identify. "Can you tell me what that is?" she asked him, nodding at the drawing. He looked at it seriously. "That's you," he said. "You're the brightest color in the room. Orange means someone you can trust." The courtroom was very quiet. The judge smiled. She signed the papers. We had dinner that night at my apartment, which Jaylen had already started calling the Saturday place, and which I was quietly beginning to think of differently. I made his favorite, which is not lasagna, it is buttered noodles with the specific ratio of butter he has strong opinions about. He sat across from me at the kitchen table with his markers spread out and talked for the better part of an hour about the etymology of dinosaur names. Specifically, he had thoughts about the word terrible lizard being a mistranslation and felt the public deserved to know. I agreed that the public deserved to know. I asked clarifying questions. I took his position on the matter seriously. Damon sat at the counter with a cup of coffee, watching his son, and every few minutes he'd catch my eye over Jaylen's head with a look I didn't need to translate. After Jaylen was asleep, in the room I'd given him the IKEA loft bed for because he'd said he wanted to sleep like he was in a tree, Damon and I sat at the kitchen table together the way we used to as kids when we were figuring something out. "She was so good at it," he said. "I know." I thought I was losing my mind sometimes, thought I was misremembering things. She'd say that's not what happened, and I'd start to think maybe she was right. "She was very good at it," I said. He looked at his coffee. "I keep thinking about the money. About Mom. If Jaylen hadn't been under that table, but he was." Damon looked up. "He was paying attention," I said, even when she thought no one was, especially then. "My mother is still herself on good days. The accounts are frozen and protected. Ms. Beaumont has been given clearer authority. The estate lawyer has added additional verification requirements for any document changes. We are being careful in a way we should have been careful before, but that's the thing about the people we trust the most. We don't audit them. We just trust. The criminal trial is pending. I haven't attended any pre-trial proceedings. I have better things to do. Damon is seeing a therapist, which took me months to convince him to try, and which I think is the best thing he's done for himself in years. He says it's helping." He sounds like himself again. Jaylen started a new school this September, one with a better inclusion program and an art room that he described to me in such granular detail on the drive home that I had to concentrate to remember I was also supposed to be driving. He has a teacher he likes. He's made a friend, a kid named Max, who also has opinions about color theory. He still draws every Sunday at my kitchen table. Last week, he slid a piece of paper across to me without comment. A small woman at a kitchen table, orange at the center. Around her, blue shapes, protective geometry, I thought. People standing close. "Is that me?" I asked. He didn't look up from his next drawing. "You're always orange," he said. "Orange means safe. I kept the drawing. It's on my fridge now, some things you hold on to." Some people spend their whole lives being quiet because no one taught them that their voice was allowed to take up space. Jaylen spent 6 years watching and listening and waiting. Not because he had nothing to say, because he was 6 years old and trying to understand what he held in his hands and who was safe enough to give it to. He found me. And because he did, we found each other.